In this video, I will show you how to make an isolette cover for the neonatal intensive care unit. Isolettes. We've been working in conjunction with the nurses at Dolly Parton Children's Hospital. These are the covers that we have developed to cover their isolettes. It consists of a large body part, main part. In the middle is a window opening with a cover. At the bottom are two buttonholes where it can be attached to the isolette. And then there's a flap, which we call the house shape because it's shaped like a house, that goes over the edge of the isolette. This one in particular is lined in a dark fabric, and it's a soft children's print fabric. They asked us not to use flannels or fleece, but only to use a cotton print. And now I'll show you how it's made. In order to help, I've made a rough drawing of the isolette cover. This is a rough drawing. It is not to scale, but it does have the measurements that you will need. You will cut the large pieces for the body. You will cut them at 33 inches by 55 inches. Then you will cut the house piece at 25.5 inches by 21.5 inches. Then you'll make a mark at 13.5 inches up the sides. You'll make centered marks 6 inches out from the center, and then draw a line between those two marks, and that's how you get the house shape cut from it. When the time comes, the buttonholes will be placed on 3 inches from center, so they're 6 inches apart, and 1.5 inches up from the edge. That's written here. They're 3/4 inch buttonholes. The window is fitted 13 inches from the base of the body, and it is cut out at 4.5 inches by 6 inches, the window piece. The flap that covers it will be made from a separate piece. And that flap piece will measure 7.5 by 9 inches. We begin by cutting our pieces. These are my backing pieces. They've asked for black or navy, dark navy, just to keep it calm and dark for them. And I'm going to start by cutting my backing piece into a piece that is 55 by 33. This one has already been cut at 55 by 33. So I'm going to cut my cover piece, my top piece, to 55 by 33 as well. For my quilt, I bought 2 yards of a directional fabric. And if you have bought 2 yards, once you have cut your 55-inch piece, your 55-inch length, you'll have a piece left over. It's not big enough to make your house. And once you've cut off your 33-inch piece, you'll have a long strip left over, which also is not big enough to make the house unit. So you'll have to piece it. This is how I do it. I take the leftover from the 33-inch cut, put it out long. I took off the end of it, I cut a little piece here that's going to be 7.5 inches, so it will be big enough to make my house, the window flap. 7.5 inches, and we'll set that aside for now. Then this long piece that's remaining, I'm going to cut in half, and I will sew it together here in order to piece for the house, but unfortunately, still not big enough. Once I sew it together, there's still not quite enough to make that house unit. So I'm going to take a leftover from my piece that's beyond the 55, and I'll sew it to the side. You can see it's not going to be big enough, so this piece I will have to sew a little piece from it. I'll sew to the side, and when we make our house unit, it will be big enough. It'll all be clear in a minute. Okay, my pieces are pieced, and now I'm going to cut out the house unit. And what I do in order to do that, if you like, you can make yourself a paper pattern, which I've done here. I use the dimensions that I put in the instructions 25.5 at the bottom, 21.5 for the length, and then these are cut 13 inches up and 6 inches on either side of center for out. And I'll slow that down just a minute to show you. You can see that when I pieced, this didn't go all the way up, but that's okay because the house is going to be able to cut it off there. So what I'm going to do is line up my fabrics. I've lined them up right sides together so that when I do cut out my house, they'll be all ready to pin and sew. So I've got my seams pressed open, right sides together. I'm going to cut out my house unit. Ready to cut my house piece. If you don't have a paper pattern made, these pieces right sides together are exactly 25.5 by 21.5. I went to the midpoint of that, and then I measured 6 inches out from the midpoint on both sides. From the bottom, I measured up 13.5 inches, and from this, I'll be cutting my line. Barely made it there, but that's okay because we're going to be using larger seams. So let's pull this down just a little bit to make sure we get it. Cut here and cut here to make the house piece. All right. Finally, we're going to cut the flap for the window covering. This is a 9 by 7.5 inch piece. I've cut a backing and a top, and I like to curve my edges over. I have a little pattern here. You can do freehand, you can do whatever you like to do. This pattern is just going to fit on here, and with my rotary cutter, I'm going to cut both of them around the curve of this pattern. You don't have to do that, but I just think it makes it look a little neater. Now it's time to sew. I'm going to start with my house piece and my flap piece. The flap piece is the only piece that you will sew in a 1/4 inch seam. All the other seams will be 1/2 inch seams, but the flap piece is going to be a 1/4 inch seam. I have mine pinned right sides together. I'm going to sew around the curved edge here and leave the top open for turning. And once you've done that, you can just leave the top open because it'll eventually be sewn in. With the house piece, I'm going to sew again around all the edges, this in a 1/2 inch seam, around all the edges, leave the top part open for turning. And once you've turned it, you can leave that open because that will be incorporated into the body in the next step.
Okay.
Okay, now that you have these two pieces sewn, I went ahead and clipped the curves, turned them, and pressed them. You can see this one has an open raw edge, that's fine. This one has an open raw edge, that's fine. What I need to do next is sew top stitch with a longer thread, longer stitch length, top stitch around these edges, this piece and this piece, and then these pieces need to be quilted so that they can hold together through lots of washings and they'll still hold their form. I have a little heart template that I like to quilt on my doors, on my door flap. You can do whatever you want. Quilt an X through it, it's not important. With this one, I generally quilt from this corner to this corner to this corner, and either once across this way, or I might just make a big X in the middle and once across this way. Really doesn't matter as long as you're doing quilting that will hold it down. If you like to do free motion quilting and like to play a little bit, go right ahead. Whatever you need to do to quilt these to hold them together. Make sure that you use black in your bobbin, and then you can use a matching thread in your top. Okay, so I have my finished pieces. I have my house piece sewn, top stitched. I just showed 3 quick lines to quilt it down. It might be easier to see on the back side because the white comes through. You notice the lines aren't perfectly straight. That doesn't matter. Just needs to hold it together. Same with my little window piece. Got my heart on the back, and these are ready. Okay, now it comes time to put together the top piece with the house piece. And what you'll need to do, I've put them right sides together, lined up edges. But what I had to do was find the middle, the center of the top piece. And I had to find the center of the house piece at the raw edges. And what I'm going to do is insert this in here like this, lining up centers, matching black to black, and we'll be matching print to print, just like that. Line that up. If you like, you can baste this to hold it in place. I'm just going to use pins to baste it, but that's in place there. And this is coming here right to the center so that I can pin it here, all the raw edges together, and pin it here, raw edges together. The reason I have these pins facing out is because when I sew, or when I pin anything, I use my pins as indicators. The corners are pinned here, pin facing this way. But at the bottom, when we sew this, we need to leave a section open for turning. And so what I've done to remind myself of that is these pins are facing the opposite direction. So I know if a pin is facing this direction, that is an indicator something has to happen. Right here, I've put my pins facing this direction because this is the very edge of the house. And when I sew around it, I'm going to backstitch a couple times in order to reinforce that seam. So that's why I have these pins facing the other direction. When I get to the edge here, I'm going to backstitch a little bit to reinforce just at the corners of the house. But right now I need to go ahead and pin all the way around these matched edges. They are right sides together. This is where I'm going to backstitch. This is where I'm going to leave open for the opening. Corner here. Match this at the corner as well. Then we're going to sew again in a 1/2 inch seam all the way around. I'll start here where my pins are out. I'm going to sew all the way around, turn at the corners, all the way around, incorporating this house unit into it, back stitching here where my pins indicate, all the way around to this pin where I'll have left it open for turning. Now that I've sewn and turned my piece, I just wanted to show you here about pressing, because this is the opening. This is the large opening where I turned it. And so we're going to have to press it to where the edges of that opening are folded under. Let me get out here. Trying to make a nice straight line. It's not always easy. I'll sew on both sides of it. Press on both sides. Press the edges under. And then again, this piece, the entire piece, is going to be taken to the sewing machine, top stitched right around the edge, and then this piece needs to be quilted as well. Before we go any further with the quilting, I have this entire thing assembled. I have top stitched around the edge, and I also top stitched just as I went here. That's top stitched, and that, remember, incorporates that raw edge in here. Top stitch around all the edges, including closing off where we left it open to turn. Now it's time to quilt the main body, but before I do that, I want to mark where my buttonholes and where my window opening are going to go so that I'm careful not to quilt over those areas. When I cut out the window opening, I would cut the quilting, and that's not a good idea. So all I'm doing, I've marked the middle of the bottom here. I'm just going to put a ruler on at the middle, 1.5 inches up. And then I took my blue marking pen. You can take any kind of pen you like, or any kind of marker that's erasable. I made a little mark for the buttonholes, 3 inches on both sides of the center, 1.5 inches up. That's where the bottom of the buttonhole will begin. And then I also took my ruler 13 inches up and centered on the middle. And I made a mark. This is going to be the bottom of my window opening. It's going to be 4.5 inches wide. So from center, I went out 1, 2 1/4, made a little mark here. And from the center out 1, 2 1/4, made a little mark here. And then I'll be going up 6 inches, which is here. Again from the center. And I can make my marks here and here, 4.5. just to keep track of where that window opening is going to be. I don't want to quilt anywhere around that. When it comes time for the quilting, I like to keep my lines about 6 inches apart. The easiest way to do that is to start in the middle and quilt. Again, be careful of your window opening. Stop there. I use a sliver of soap. You can use whatever you want to mark, or just go wild. Don't even make any marks. Do the quilting the way that you want to. From here, I go out 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches. It's not exactly 6. Sometimes it evens out, and then I can just quilt down the straight lines that way. You could go horizontally, starting at the bottom. Again, making sure that you're not quilting anywhere where your window is or your buttonholes. You could make your marks here and go up every 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, just so that you have the top held together with the backing so that it'll hold up in a washing. Okay, now it's time to cut the window opening in the top area. What I've done is with a erasable marker, marked around my window opening. Again, this is 13 inches up from the bottom, and it measures 4.5 by 6.5. I'm not going to cut on my drawn lines. Instead, I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch in, roughly a 1/2 inch in from those lines. But I also want to cut on a diagonal from a 1/2 inch to each of the corners. And each time I do that, after it's cut out, we'll be able to fold those under, top stitch around, and that will be entirely, the raw edges will be entirely encased in that. You can see my quilting stitching stayed way outside of that so that I even have room to cut, fold under, and top stitch around. Now that we have the window cut out, I'm going to bring it over to the iron, and I can fold under these edges that were left open to make the window opening. Fold under the top here, and then the bottom, encasing those raw edges. Then we're going to take it over to the machine, and we're going to top stitch around. And what I do is I top stitch right close to the edge, and then when I get to the corners, I go down, back stitch, and down again, because there's a little bit of fray edge here, and we want to be sure that that fray is caught and held underneath. So at each corner, I'll top stitch around, make my corner down, back, and down again, all the way around that window opening. Finally, I'll take about a 1/4 inch out and again sew another top stitch row around so that this window is really, really well made, all encased and all held in. Finally, you'll put the window covering on it. I have my quilted window flap, and it's going to lay this way. So I'm going to fold it over here, leave a little bit here to stitch down. I'm going to stitch down the edge about a 1/4 inch away, and then after I've stitched it down, I will fold it over and press it and top stitch, enclosing that raw edge. So you want to sew it down, fold it over and press, and then sew again so that this raw edge gets enclosed in the window flap. If you like, you can put a little piece of Velcro here to hold it tight. I choose not to. If I get feedback from the nurses in the NICU that they need the Velcro, I can always come back and put Velcro or a little snap on there. Last thing is to put your buttonholes in, and this will be completed.